glows. Indie authors in the seat of fame, tales of adventure or love untamed, writers who deserve more acclaim, sharing their stories, joys and pain. Eclectic Goat asks, what's your dream? Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen, authors laughing, eyes agleam.
And good evening,
Hello,
everyone.
hello.
How is everyone this evening?
Is that for me or is that for chat?
That's for everyone. That's
Oh,
the meaning of
I'm,
everyone.
I'm a little bit under the weather, so
Yes,
people may hear me.
I really appreciate you making it despite that.
Well, my sleeping hours are still roughly the same, although I have been making a bit of an effort to go to bed slightly earlier. But I'm drinking like loads of fluids and doing all the right things. But if I occasionally have to dash to the bathroom, I'll let you know.
Well, that's what we
But
need.
I'm fast at that. I'm fast at doing that at the cinema, so I'll be fast at doing it here. So
Well, I'm really glad you're here, and we will. I have tried very hard to keep this to an hour-ish, so that you can continue to get as much rest as you need in order to get better. And I
yeah,
really do
I'm good for
appreciate.
like 90 minutes. I'm up to 90 minutes. I think I'm good
Okay,
for. So
all right.
yeah,
So you heard him, chat. You get 90 minutes to ask questions, and that's all you get. So your new book, Silver Screen Journeys. I
yeah.
am a good chunk of the way through it.
Yeah, you said I'm impressed. Do you have the typo version or the non-typo version? I'm
The
curious to.
typo version.
The
I have the
typo
PD.
version is the one that has Telly Savalas called Kelly Savalas in the Kelly's Heroes section of the book, and
Now I'm gonna
there's a
have to go
story
back and
behind why
look.
this happened.
Now I'm gonna have to go back and look. I got
Yeah,
the I got the
give you a
PDF
favour on.
because I don't do
Ah,
Amazon, and shipping was a total
oh,
nightmare
that's
to get.
right. I sent you an additional PDF to read as well, didn't I? Or-
All I have is the PDF at the moment, but
yeah, no, I
which
think
is
your version will probably be more up to date. I think.
I was
I hope
gonna
so.
say
If it's, if,
I think I remember there being Kelly, but
yeah,
it's
no, that hopefully you'll have the more up to date one, which has got considerably less typos in it. Sorry, do continue.
always a good thing. As an editor, I'm a big fan of of no typos.
Me too.
Yeah, I think one of the things I found the most fascinating about the beginning of this book is that you grew up with a television in your room, which I think was probably fairly unusual then.
Not straight away. I inherited that. First of all, I had a black and white telly that I inherited from my grandparents when my grandparents got their colour television, and we still had a black and white one downstairs at that point. We didn't have a colour TV initially, and I think I probably had that from I don't know, I want to say 6 or 7 years of age. So it wasn't there from the get go, because I do remember that having the telly on that windowsill resulted in our dog Ben getting very upset, and because that was his perch, he liked to look out, and
Mm-hmm.
he could see down the street, and he could bark when one of us was coming home, and and he'd leap off that perch, and that used to be the windowsill I used to construct like the volcano base from You Only Live Twice on. I remember coming back from school being all excited to play with it, and my dog had just completely destroyed it. He'd kind of leapt up on there and fallen through the volcano, and kicked all the soldiers out the middle bit, and it was a mess. Books everywhere. My hours of precise set reconstruction all laid waste in a
I
few
think you were
seconds.
more precise at 6 than I am at 46 by the sounds.
I've got.
um,
I mean, I don't have loads of memories of my childhood, but a lot of the ones that I do have are attached to specific events, and a lot of those events are watching films with my parents because I was such an avid film person.
mhm. And you had several cinemas that were fairly near you, it sounds like, as well.
Well, we lived in a place called Berrylands, which is a suburb of another place called Surbiton. Surbiton is on the outskirts of Kingston. Kingston was the sort of nearest big town with the big boy shops and all that kind of thing. And you had the Kingston Granada there, which was 3 screens. One screen was pretty big. But the very first cinema that I went to was the one on the cover of the book, which is what's on the cover of the book, which is called was at the time the Odeon Surbiton. It was a single screen,
Hmm.
and it sat about 1,500 people, And this is back in the day when early 70s, if you went on a Saturday, most of those 1,500 seats were going to be sold. And we saw Oliver there, I think probably around 1975
Hmm.
on re-release. I was a toddler, I was tiny. But they kind of warned my parents. They said, "Oh, the bits with what's his name, Bill Sykes, might be a bit scary." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to be scared." So I was going to see the film. That was it. And it was a PG, so kids were allowed. They were right. Bill Sykes scared the absolute living crap out of me. Played by Oliver Reed. So I talk about that in the book, and like that is a very vivid memory of my first cinema experience. And for a long time, I always used to say it was Bambi, but actually, when I sat down and looked at the running order and looked at the release dates, I realised that Oliver was first, and also that cinema shut down fairly soon after that,
Hmm.
which was a real shame. So it was the only film I got to see there.
I But what struck me was the fact that I am a couple of years younger than you are, I think, but not that huge a difference. And I grew up, the nearest cinema was 45 minutes to an hour away from me, and I grew up without a television.
Right.
So I had almost exactly the opposite media upbringing. And yet we both ended up with a great love of movies and writing and editing, and the similarities of where our paths came together, despite how different our upbringings were, was kind of entertaining to me.
Yeah, I mean there was a family 2 doors down from us called the Drakes. I'm still good friends with Julie Drake, who something like the age of 4 or whatever. There's a very famous black and white photo of me and Julie kissing on a space hopper. I think you call them something else in America. You know those things that kids bounce on and hang
Trampolines?
on to the horns. We call them
Oh,
space hoppers.
I don't know.
I think you call them something else in the States, but anyway, and I'll never forget that. Like, you see, my parents were like, my mum was a ballerina, my dad was a graphic designer. They were both quite arty. They were both quite sort of laid back, and so we sat round the dining table for a proper dinner. I think sort of once or twice a week. But if there was something on the TV that anyone wanted to see at a particular time, whether it be my parents or whether it be us, and that clashed with dinner time was served in the on the coffee table in the lounge, so we could all watch telly together. Whereas the Drake's family, that was an absolute no-no. Dinner as a family, nothing. The father was very strict about it, and I'll never forget that Thunderbirds was Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds, which I'm a massive fan. Was on every Sunday at 1 o'clock, and that's the first time I ever saw it. It was probably sort of televised around 74 or something. It would have been a repeat. And I never forget sort of saying to the Drake, "Oh yeah, saw Thunderbirds again this weekend." Yeah, we weren't allowed to watch it because that was the time of their Sunday lunch. There was no TV allowed, you know. So
Whereas I
different
grew up,
cultures,
yeah.
different
Whereas I
experiences.
grew up being told we weren't allowed to have books at the table because,
Right.
we had dinner together and there was there was no television. So
Yeah, it's amazing how that environment can impact and affect your life going forwards. And again, it's going to be the same for children that have grown up from day one with nothing but an iPad in their
mhm.
hand. If they've never gone and made something out of their own imagination from a box of scattered random Lego bricks, I'm not talking these sets that people build from Star Wars and whatnot, because all the creativity's gone out of that now.
Yeah.
Might as well
I
be
agree.
a model kit, you know. Yeah. Those kids are never going to have any imagination. They're never going to want to recreate those scenes with their toys. And you see that in Toy Story. You know, I think it's the opening of Toy Story 2. The kid is recreating a scene using all the toys available in his room to create something he's probably watched on telly, you know, whether it be a Western or whatever. And that's what I used to do. I used to recreate everything I'd seen in these movies, whether it was the big underwater battle in Thunderball, James Bond with all the frogmen, or you know the ninjas coming down the volcano in You Only Live Twice. These battles were exciting to me, so I wanted to recreate them. And then when I got older, I would play them out with dice, you know, so kind of tabletop gaming effectively, without me even realizing it.
That's an interesting. This is not on my list of questions, but um, what do you think changed that caused kids to go from those of us that would watch something or experience something and then use it to kind of spin our own creative endeavors to the kids of today who just don't seem to?
I mean, you've got to understand that anyone, certainly in the UK, over the age of 40 will probably, maybe 45, would probably be able to remember a time when we only had 3 television channels. I talk about this in the book early on, what it was like, you know, how you got access to films. We had 3 channels. I think by 1980 we had 4. So we had Channel 4. And then by the mid 80s, every house had a video, but you still went to the video store. You still kind of researched the film you were going to watch. And everybody thought video would kill the cinema experience. And home movie theatres weren't an easy, accessible thing then. So anyone who'd seen a film on an opening night back then knew, you know, Ghostbusters, opening night, 1984, in a cinema with 800 other people on a Friday night, Saturday night. Great experience. Everybody chanting the song, everybody calling out. Watching that on a VHS rental on a Saturday afternoon, you know, with maybe other people running around, mum's taking a phone call in the kitchen. It just doesn't have the same emotional impact. And I think unless people were really trying to save money, people were pretty quick to cotton on to the fact that the cinema experience, not just the movie, the cinema experience, I talk about this in the book a lot, is half the reason that they would go. You know, cheering on the good guys and getting all excited, or spontaneously getting up and dancing like people did in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I had a great conversation with Cindy Pickett about that, who played the mother. You know, these are all unique to the cinema viewing experience. The kids of today, sorry, it's a long-winded setup for your question, but the kids of today don't have that didn't have those scenarios, right? So they are used to everything being available at the touch of a finger from day one. And a modern sort of middle class family will probably have, if they don't have a pull down projector movie room, and they may well, if they've got like a, you know, father who's good with his hands, probably built one in the garage or something, but they'll at the very least, they'll have a massive plasma widescreen, you know, 46-inch or 52-inch television with a surround sound system and 6 speakers. So while you haven't quite recaptured the opening night with 800 people, you're starting to get the quality of the watching and the hearing of the film.
Hmm.
And the other thing is, the cinema experience has changed. You're extremely lucky when you get that many people in the cinema, and when you do, the more people that you get in a screen with you now, the higher the risk there is that someone's going to pull out their phone and start using it. I mean, every time I went to the States and saw a movie in the last 10, let's say 10, 15 years, so I probably went 7 times in that 15-year gap. Every time I went, I would have seen a film. Every time, without fail, this is absolutely without fail, even when there was only 6 of us in the cinema, somebody got their phone out and used it during the film.
That would drive
In
me
every
insane.
single, yeah. And it did, I mean, and if you forget to turn off your alerts, it's not beyond realms that you catch yourself doing it. You're like, oh, who's texting me, kind of thing. Oh God, no, don't let me be that guy. I've had to remind myself not to do it occasionally because the way we communicate has constantly changed. Babysitters expect to be in constant touch with the parents, even if they're in the cinema. Whereas before it was like, we're at the cinema, you've got the responsibility for 3 hours. We'll be back in 3 hours. No one had a mobile. So,
Yeah. And
here's a number of a neighbor for emergencies or whatever. It'd be like that.
there's a difference too. I mean, you were talking about going to the cinema by yourself when you were quite young. And, I was babysitting when I was 12 or 13. Um,
Right.
and I had contact with my parents if something went wrong, but I didn't have contact with the kids' parents. And
Yeah,
nowadays you can't ever imagine having a 12 or a 13-year-old watching a toddler and and a 7-year-old.
yeah, I mean, I think I would have been 12 or 13 when I went to the cinema on my own, but my parents didn't think I was going on my own. They thought I was meeting other friends there, and it was the night after I first saw Ghostbusters. And I just thought, oh, this movie is so good, I've got to go back and see it again tomorrow. I totally lied to my parents and said, oh, a load of my friends are going tomorrow. Didn't have a clue if that was true. I just
Well,
wanted to go.
I meant alone, like without adult supervision kind of thing.
Well, yeah, that was the time that I went because they thought other friends of mine were going to be there. So they dropped me off at the cinema and I wasn't there with friends or adult supervision. The first time I was allowed to go with just friends was the time we went to see Superman 2 and my mum thought my friend's mum was going to be with us, but she dropped us off at the cinema and then disappeared to go and do shopping, So those stories are both in the book as well. The Superman 2 one is quite entertaining, actually. Great. My
So,
favourite Superman movie.
backing up to something you said earlier, because this is on my list of questions. You
Sure.
talk a lot about that movie experience, about how things are sort of more intense when you have that audience reaction going on around you. And
Yeah.
that's been one of my concerns about the number of people not going to theaters now. They say, well, everyone has surround systems and, it's really expensive but you don't get that sense of connection with, well, you said the theater near you held what, 1,500 people?
Yeah.
You don't have that connection with 1,500 strangers experiencing the same intensity of emotions. Do you think
Yeah.
that's because of the decline of the movies, or do you think maybe some of the decline of movies is because they don't like the new writers don't know what it's like to experience that anymore?
I think there's lots of factors at play. First and foremost, going to the cinema now for a lot of people is not their priority. You know, the governments have allowed the energy companies to basically completely screw us the planet wide over. So, my gas and electric bill this time last year was roughly around $400-500 or something. The same bill this year was like $1,300. Yet my wages have not gone up. So how am I supposed to find that money? Well, other things are going to have to suffer. I'm not going to be buying physical media. I'm not going to be buying collectible Lego sets. I'm not going to be buying books. I'm not going to be going to the cinema. And that's not the main reason I stopped going to the cinema, because I have pretty much at the moment. But it certainly is a factor. So that would be a factor for a lot of people. But that aside, in the States especially, you've had a lot of cinema closures. We've had several over here. So it's not always easy for people to get to them.
Mhm.
As you know, they, like you say, they used to be more readily available. They were all over the place. Now you've got to travel a bit further. And
Well,
then,
I've always lived in the sticks, so there was never a theater
yeah,
anywhere near me. So
I think you're right in terms of the content as well. I mean, the last time I saw what I would call an IP film, where, you know, it was packed out, everybody was quite invested, I would say was probably the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Now, I was at the opening weekend of the Part 1 Dead Reckoning Mission Impossible. I talk about that in the book. It's near the end. And it was packed out, and it was a fun screening. But that the intensity of the energy of the crowd wasn't there. And I think that was because, as a franchise, it's been it's quite a discombobulated franchise compared to something, say, like James Bond.
Mhm.
The quality of the Mission Impossible films, I absolutely love Tom Cruise and his work ethic. I think he's an outstanding professional and done a huge amount for the cinema industry, you know, the film industry. So I don't have any criticism of Cruise, and I don't care about his personal life, because that's the same across the board with me. I only care about, you know, what people give me in terms of films and television
Art
content.
versus
I
artist.
don't
Yeah.
Their personal life is not my concern, right?
Yep.
And but those films have been all quite wildly different, and some of them have got more and more over the top. And the more over the top the action, and this has happened across the board with action films in the 2000s, particularly in the last 10 years. They I don't know what it is, but executives must be sitting around in a conference room going, "Oh, how do we make this next film? You know, how do we make this better than the last one? Oh, I know. We'll have the bad guys can have a bigger car or a bigger tank, or we'll make the stunt bigger. It's always, let's go big." And actually, I find that the bigger the action and the more ridiculous it is. Like, there was a Fast and Furious where they had a chase with a submarine across an iceberg or something. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, that was just utter nonsense. Me and my ex-partner, we couldn't believe how stupid that was. And it's like you're watching it, but you're not engaged, because you're watching a chase that could never happen in reality. Not only could it not happen in our reality, it's so ridiculous, it doesn't feel believable in the reality that those people had created. So the more ridiculous the car chases got in Fast and Furious, the less interesting I found the films. The earlier films were quite gritty, especially the first one was quite dark, and the last one with Paul, God rest his soul, was an incredibly moving movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the more ridiculous and over the top the stunt, the less interesting for me the movie is. And I don't know how chat feels about it, but I'll give you a good example. So they did there was a recent Star Trek movie, I forget which one it was, and the big surprise in the movie was suddenly, the enemy have this massive, cloaked, super powerful super ship that appears like right next to the Enterprise, whichever version of the Enterprise it was. I've lost count now. And it was like that was like the big reveal in the film. I think this is the one where they brought back Khan, one of the remakes with Khan in it, and that was so naff. It was like if they had done a battle with 2 or 3 ships, and shot it in the same way that the battles were shot in Wrath of Khan. The ships move slowly. It's all kind of quite naval, and things are tactical. And to turn a ship takes time. Space is big. Whereas we were kind of in Star Wars mode, where everything was like zooming around, doing these amazing right angles every 3 seconds, and that kind of action, especially in the Star Trek universe, just doesn't fit that universe, and it just feels boring.
Yeah.
oh, a bigger spaceship. Oh, we've never seen that before. It was like the second Independence Day movie. Absolutely terrible film. I love the
Yeah.
first one. The first one was great, Saturday night cheese. The second one, they should have made it more incognito. It should have been, hunting down the survivors of the crashed ships and forming some kind of underground movement and taking on the humans, in a different way. It could have been really interesting, but they just, bigger ship comes and destroys half the Earth. None of it even made any scientific, vague movie reality sense. So I just tuned out from that film about half an hour in.
Yeah, I joke, well, it's not really a joke, but I comment every so often that if something doesn't blow up in the first 10 minutes in a movie these days, everyone starts complaining that it's boring. Um,
Yeah.
it's like the new, I don't know how you feel about it, but the new Nosferatu movie. Um, it's really kind of a slow psychological horror, and the number of people talking about how boring it is has kind of astonished me. And apparently, several of them have said they really expected it to basically be a monster slasher movie.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've I've seen mixed things about it. I've seen the first half of the film, but I want to wait and see it properly. That director is a great director, but you know what you get with him when you're going in. It's always going to be slow burn, lots of metaphors, great
I
photography, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I used to do like I never, wrote plays or anything the way you did, but I did a lot of tech stuff backstage. And so everything they were talking about where they did the scenes that were lit entirely by candles and like that's the kind of stuff I have great that's the love of the art that I have great appreciation for is those interesting little touches.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff with shadows and proper, as you say, proper physical lighting. That's sort of largely left alone in post production. It's not graded too much, and Nosferatu is definitely a throwback. I like the fact there's someone in your chat who's actually called the Big Ship. And I was saying, big ships, don't go with that idea. That's quite funny.
Tomby has a
Um,
question for you, and I don't want it to get
sure.
lost too far in the shuffle here.
No,
He
that's all
said,
right. Yeah, just you can throw them up as they come. I mean, whatever's your preference.
I love the original Blade Runner, and I feel that Rusker's speech about lost moments is one of the best in cinema. What is your favorite cinema speech and why?
Oh, that is a really, really good question. And do you know what? I don't think I've been asked that before, but I didn't have to think very long to get an answer. It's got to be Al Pacino's speech at the end of Scent of the Woman, where
Oh,
he's defending.
I haven't thought of that one in ages.
Now that is a great speech, and do you know what? I've used it in an acting class so many times. I had it printed out for everybody, and I got them to you know play it out several times. Uh, and I've often thought about trying to get the rights to put that movie on stage because it would work great as a play.
It would.
Um, yeah, I mean, it really would. It would be, it would be amazing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just love that speech. I mean, it's so well done. Are you finished, Mr. Slade? No, I'm just getting warmed up. I don't know who went to this place. William Howard Taft, William Jennings Bryan, William Tell, whoever. Their spirit is dead. If they ever had one, it's gone. Al Pacino is having the time of his life doing that speech, and the fact is that the way they staged it, because they shot it at the school for real. The kids were all watching and reacting to it for real, and they used multiple cameras. So I think they only did a few takes. They didn't do that many takes of it. And the majority of the footage comes from the very first take that they used. So all the kids' reactions to it are all, sort of genuine. I think they shot the last one, hooah, and everybody cheers. I think they shot that a few times. But that's probably, if I had a go-to favorite it's probably that, because I mean, it's great for the story, great acting. Still love it now. You
Yeah,
know,
and it's he
great
was
scene.
he did some really great intense speeches.
Well, I don't
He
want to. Sorry for interrupting. I don't want to forget the supporting actor in that scene, James Reborn, who played the teacher, Mr. I think it's Mr. Trask, and he was also the head of kind of the Black Ops Independence Day, and Mr. President. I'm afraid that's not entirely accurate. That guy, he always played those kind of parts, and he was amazing.
Mhm.
And there's a great story about him. Should have put it in the book actually, where he got diagnosed with cancer, and he wrote his own obituary, talking about the wonderful career he'd had and how thankful he was for all the amazing parts and all the amazing people he'd worked with. And it was put up on his death in whatever, the New York Times or something like that. It's one of the most moving obituaries I've ever read.
Mm.
And that scene is Pacino's scene, but it only works because he's surrounded by incredible actors that sell it for him.
Yeah.
So you got to give
Yeah.
them their due as well.
Yeah, I was actually thinking that so those intense, you know, end of the movie speeches tend to be the ones people remember, but I think one
Sure.
of my favorites is the very first speech that the Godfather gives in the original Godfather movie, because it does such a
Uh,
beautiful job of setting the stage for the rest of the movie. Like if that scene had failed, the rest of the movie would have failed.
That's
Um
the you come here on the day of my daughter's wedding. That one where he's talking to the guy. You
yeah,
need a
but that
favor. Yeah,
but
I
that would
remember
not
that.
have worked had it not been for the story that set up that. And that was very much a supporting character. And yet the whole movie ended up resting on that supporting character who's only in the movie for about 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's that scene and that speech has an incredible payoff, doesn't it? Incredible payoff. Um, well thought out, to say the least.
Um,
Forgive me coughing
no,
occasionally.
that's all right. Like I said, I appreciate you being here, not especially when you're not feeling well. So,
No
uh,
problem.
you also talk a lot about the social connection that movies gave you. The
Sure.
specific memories of time with your grandmother and the times that your mother, went to the movies with you alone, or your dad went to the movies with you alone, and those bonding and the friends
I
that
mean,
you
it made
bonded with.
me and my father, me and my father especially close. I think until we had that, he was a very quiet guy, a very gentle, sort of quiet, typical Scandinavian, doesn't express a lot of emotion,
Hmm.
um, to people generally. And yeah, that was the one thing we really did together, because he wanted me to. His first passion was sailing, but his second passion was movies. And and he was used to try and get me to go sailing with him, and I hated it. I didn't want to do it, because it was on Saturdays, and Saturdays was playing with toys time. It was not go sailing with dad time in my head,
Hmm.
you know. It was playing with Star Wars toys day, and I didn't want to be told what to do on Saturday. Saturday was a sacred day because there was always a Sunday dinner. We didn't go to church, but a lot of other families did back then. So it wasn't like there were loads of kids around to play with on Saturday, because a lot of kids went to church. So so Saturday was the fun day. Um, and they gave up on trying to get me to go sailing with him. I did enjoy it a bit later in life. I did go with him a few times, but once they took the pressure off. But as soon as he realised, I had quite a good knack for sort of picking films out that were coming up that he would also like. Yeah, pretty much any time I said, "Dad, you got to go and see this one," he would agree. So
Hmm.
yeah,
I
so it's a
loved
big
the
thing. But,
stories. I loved the stories about you and your grandmother going, like her
oh yeah, she was
going a couple of
amazing.
times. Yeah, that was wonderful. And it sounded like many of your friendships were sort of built around your love of films and their love of films as well.
I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly there were friends that were like the main thing we did was go to the movies together.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Martin Hodgson, especially, who was in the year above me, and he was tall. He was the tallest guy in his year,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the tallest guy in my year.
I think I actually
So we
remember.
used our combined height to cheat and get into R-rated movies at a very young age. Or as they were called in the UK, X certificate movie, which comes with a much more sleazy connotation.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I did want to ask. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll remember as soon as when
well,
you
no, I
finish
mean that
sharing.
was how I got into see films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Bachelor Party, Revenge of the Nerds, which were all. I think the 18 certificate happened actually during our foray of sneaking into, well, not sneaking in, but blagging our way into adult films.
Mm-hmm.
When I say adult films, I mean adult rated films. I don't mean adult entertainment films. We weren't going to see that sort of thing. Because I just realised that has a whole different meaning now. The certification changed probably around the time I was around 14 or 15. And the AA, which was 16 years or over, became certificate 15, so it was 1 year younger. And X became 18, so that it didn't have that kind of sleazy connotation. Oh yeah, that's me and Martin, that picture that I can see you've got there.
Yeah, that's. I was going to ask if this was the reference.
Yeah, so Martin, who's on the left, and me without a baseball cap on is pretty rare, so that's me with a baseball cap. That picture was probably taken, I think, in, I want to say around 2006. And I was on one of my trips back to see my parents. They were both still alive at that time. And he lived just around the corner from them, and he just had kids. So I would always take his kids' presents. And I remember his wife took that picture. Yeah.
It's a great picture.
Yeah, and we're still in touch now. Actually, we're still in touch. We go out we try and meet up at least twice a year.
Nice. Yeah, I had wanted to ask you about the UK rating system because there were points where I got a little bit confused because I was like, I don't know what this means.
Yeah, well,
Most of the slang I was okay with, but
I mean the rating system up until I think it was the early 80s or mid 80s was you had the U certificate, which never changed, and you had A certificate, which was that basically meant accompanied by an adult,
Mhm.
and then AA, which meant you had to be 16 or over, and then X. And then that all changed. The U certificate stayed the same, which was anyone. You then had PG, 15 and 18, and then later you also had PG 12 that got introduced a couple of years later.
Mhm.
And that was when it got streamlined across the world, I think.
Yeah, it's I'm trying to remember. I think was it Ghostbusters that actually caused us to get a PG-13 in this country? Because, it pretty much went from like PG, which was parental guidance, to like rated R, which was 18 or older, and that was it. Like there was for a long time there was nothing in between.
Yeah, I don't remember when we got that because obviously I probably didn't take much notice because by then I was an adult. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was fun for me when I was working in the cinema. I was sort of trying to work out how old people were because then of course I was on the box office and I knew all the tricks, so I could be proper mean about letting people in. But a bit too mean sometimes, I think. And actually, that's a picture of the cinema I used to work at, which was also the second cinema I went to with my parents. That's was called Granada Cinema originally. That picture there was when it was a Granada. I think that picture was taken like 1972, something like that. And then it became Options when I worked there, and we used to be able to get on that roof. We used to sit
Goodness.
and eat pizza right where that flagpole was. I mean, can you imagine the insurance work ethics? But we knew how to get up there, so we could. And we'd sit up there and eat pizza and like chuck pizza on people down below and things of this nature.
I
Terrible.
I assume there was not like a safety ladder or something that got you up there.
Yeah, well, there was a ladder involved. It was like stuck in the side of the building. I think we had to climb up. You know, one of those ones with a sort of cylindrical thing around it, a bit like an Iron Lady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's Empire Screen 1. There's, you know what? There's much better pictures of that online. I mean, that's just the one I put in the book. But
I love this
Empire Screen 1
picture,
is
though.
it's an amazing cinema. I mean, it's my favourite screen of all time. Now that is now an IMAX, and it's not as big. They cut it in half, so it's only got half the number of seats. It's still the same width and it's still the same size screen, but it's just lost the magic. But it's still my favourite screen. But just, you know, it was better
It's
when it
just,
was old
it looks so
Empire 1.
beautiful. And the fact that they still have the curtains and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was all those different shades in that black and white picture were caused by cathode lighting built into the walls. And
Mm-hmm.
every 30 seconds, the light would change. So, you know, yellow would sort of turn into red would turn into orange would turn into green, and you know, and so on and so on. I had about 9 different colours, and it would sort of rotate. And the sparkles that you can see in the forward arch, you can kind of see it's like sparkling up just above the curtain, immediately above the curtain. That was like a massive arch at the front, and during the opening presentation, that's when that ceiling would light up, and all the stars would suddenly kind of blink into life. It was really quite beautiful.
And now we just get commercials before the movies.
Well, I mean, you got those as well, but yeah, in that cinema, I used to get a laser show. I mean, it was amazing. I talk about that during Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yeah, the architecture on some of these pictures that you took, I was just absolutely blown away by. Oh, I wanted to show this one too.
Oh yeah, so that's my grandmother on the right, her father in the middle, who I vaguely remember being alive for about 2 years when I was probably a baby to a toddler, and that's my mother on the left.
It's a gorgeous picture. And when people still dressed up for pictures.
I mean, I can't ever, Gramps as he was known, who was in the middle, I can't ever remember him not wearing a suit, you know, because men, that's what they did back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, shirt and tie, and then Sunday best for going to church or eating Sunday roast with the family, you know. But it was, yeah, I mean, everything was different. It was a very different time.
Yeah, my grandfather used to take me fishing in a button-down shirt and wingtips, so so this was not phrased as a question, but I'm gonna phrase it as one. Farv said, "These sounds like brilliant stories. I wish I could write autobiographical sorts of things, but I don't know anyone would want to read about anything I've done." Uh,
Well,
I know Farv, and that's absolutely not true. Um, um, but how did you come to decide to write about all of this? And did you have
it
that
came about.
same did you have that same concern?
I did a bit, but um, it really came about as a result of the book I wrote before this, which is called 1988, and I wrote that in, I think it was 2021. And how that book came about was there was a couple of years in my teenage years where I kept a diary every day, and 1988 is on Amazon.com. So if one of your mods wants to find the link for it, just search 1988 under books, Lance Nielsen, and it will come up. And it's basically the poster of Die Hard is on the front, so you'll recognise it. And one of the years I kept a diary every single day was 1988, and that was the year that I first traveled to America. And I found that diary in a box, and I thought the diary was long, long gone. And I was reading through it, and it was kind of hard to equate myself with that person. But there was a lot about it that was quite moving, because I just lost this friend at the time, and I talk about him in Silver Screen Journeys as well, James Ollett. And really what the diary was it was a process of, it was about a teenager who was really lost, trying to process grief that he didn't understand or know how to deal with. And the other thing I did was I kept a complete record of all the movies I saw, when I saw them, who I was with. And I kept all the tickets and things like that from that era, along with things like my tickets to Disney World and stuff, because I went to the States for about 11 weeks, worked on a summer camp for 8 of those, and travelled around for 3. And I did everywhere on the East Coast, and then got out as far as Arizona, and then got a flight back to New York. And the diary itself didn't feel like it was going to be enough. So what I thought I would do was, I'd seen so many movies, I thought, well, let me review the films. And I saw 137 films that year, so I've reviewed most of them in the book as and when I see them. So they're kind of underneath that diary entry. And that's what got me the idea for this book, because there were things I was remembering about going to see that particular film that I hadn't actually written in the diary. I didn't elaborate on any of those things, but there were memories that came back to me. And what it made me realise was every cinema trip had some sort of memory attached to it, or some kind of emotional experience. Some not that significant, others very profound. And for example, one movie that I saw with Mark Harmon and Jodie Foster, this has come up recently, called Stealing Home. It's not a movie many people have seen. And it came out in 1988 when I was out in America, and it flopped. I thought it was a brilliant film, and then it found its success on video. That's when it sort of rented well. The creator of that, I've just found him, and I'm trying to get him to come on my channel for an interview, and he's agreed, but he's taking his time about giving me a date. But that film, which has a grief issue in it, somebody dies in the movie, massively affected me when I saw it in the cinema. And it affected me because I'd just lost this friend back in the UK, and I related to the grief that the boy suddenly had in the movie when he lost his dad. And I came out of that film, and I was completely numb. I was completely shocked. And it was because the film had connected to an event in my own life that had not long happened that before. So I had that memory attached to that specific movie. And that really was the film that gave me the idea for Silver Screen Journeys, which was, how about, I've got this box full of cinema tickets, how about I go through 101 roughly plus movies, and the memories I've got attached to those films, talk about the films, how they impacted me, who I saw them with, where I saw them, what the cinema was like, and and talk about how they impacted my life going forwards, because a lot of them did. A lot of the films I've mentioned have stolen huge chunks of time from my life. They've set me off on all kinds of hobbies or research projects or whatever. So, and they also, a lot of the films that are listed are films that influenced me as a writer, and my approach to writing, my approach to scenes, my approach to directing action, because I've done a fair bit of that as a second unit director. So yeah, so that's really 1988 was the seed for Silver Screen Journeys, and Silver Screen Journeys took it one step further, and it became kind of like an organic film journey set over nearly 50 years.
How many books have you written?
About 14, I think, but quite a lot of them. I've done my novel series, which is Diamonds in the Sky, is my kind of standard, more typical kind of science fiction novel.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the stuff that's been published, a lot of them are either plays that I've had on in the theatre. The plays have been published and they're on Amazon, and there are some screenplays of mine that I've put on Amazon. One in particular for a project that I worked on for 3 years, and it didn't happen. It huge impact on my life. And I thought, well, I'm going to publish this screenplay because I don't want all the work we did going to waste. So I'm going to put it in the public domain. So that's what I did.
So, like, other film companies would be able to take that and put on the play?
No, I've
As
got. You mean other film? Well,
like if
no. The
they
reason
bought it, would they be able to put it on, or just
no,
for
they
the?
would have to pay me a fee. I mean, yeah, but
Mhm.
the reason I in that film in particular, which was then led to me publishing other scripts, because I've got so many scripts I've written that people are never going to see, because
Mhm.
there's more films to be made on my computer than I could ever make in my lifetime, ever. And
Public domain has a different meaning here. That was why I was trying to clarify.
right, so what I meant by the term public domain was the story of that particular script is a World War II true story historical drama. The story of that is already in public domain, but my script was not in public domain. So what somebody else could do was they could go and make their own version of that, having not read my script at all. But I thought, if I get my script in the public domain and they copy any of the stuff that I know is unique to my research, and they can't say where they research those facts, they can't back that up, then I know I can do them for copyright, because the people that screwed me on that movie were still out there, and they were going to try and steal it off me at one point. So I knew that was a possibility. So I just thought, you know what, let me get that book in public domain.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's what I did. Got it out there.
So you've done plays, you've done science fiction, and now you've done 2 autobiographies?
Yeah, so I suppose 1988 and Silver Screen Journeys are 2 autobiographical books. Whereas, and then I've published probably about 8 or 9 of my plays, something like that.
Mhm.
And then the Diamonds in the Sky science fiction novel series, which is supposed to be 6 books. The 4th one should have been out by now. I've only done the first 2. I'm doing better than George R.R. Martin, but
You're doing much
yeah, I did
better.
yeah, I mean, I did have an actual divorce to contend with, so that really, that really threw me. But yeah, I mean, the 3rd one of that will come out when I'm ready to write it. I just need to be in the right headspace to write it, because writing novels like that is a very, very, very different skill set. And I mean,
Mhm.
I'm mainly a playwright and a script writer. Writing novels is a very new thing for me. I've only been doing it for the last 10 years.
Mhm.
So, and it's a very different skill set. And you have to do a lot more planning. So you don't write yourself into a hole. You ideally you want to know where the story's going. You want to know, where the character arcs are, and you don't want too much extra waffle. Oh, look, my Star Destroyers.
Yeah, I wanted to include a little bit of levity here. I think I might be the only person who really fixated on this picture in the book, but my husband is a minis fanatic, and there are many of these, or not these, obviously, but there are very similar things in our game room, and lots of them.
Yeah, now those are, I've got 7 of them. There's only 6 in this picture, but there are 7 of them. I've got, or maybe even more, might even have 8. And they are Revel kit Imperial Star Destroyers that were out in the 80s. And we built a 6-foot Star Destroyer, the SSD, people call it Super Star Destroyer. Me and my dad built that. And these ships were to go along with that for a Return of the Jedi space battle game that I put on at a game show. I think it was attended by about 1,000, 2,000 people, something like that. And those ships were for that game, and of course that all came about because of the space battle and Return of the Jedi. So that's one of the stories in the book.
Yeah, those games are very popular with a certain subsect of people, and I happen to be married to one of them. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
so I
mean,
saw.
we created this before any of those things were available. This was, what model kits can we get our hands on? Write our own rule system, and put it on at a game show, and people basically could sit down and play that game for 20 minutes. That was it. Yeah. So
I
yeah,
think
but
there
I've got
are.
a lot of those games as well.
I just have a few more of these pictures here. If you want to
Sure.
talk
It's,
about them.
yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite pictures in the book. And oh man, yeah, Alan. I mean, I lost two great mentors within about a year of each other. One was Alan Tompkins, who's in that photo, art director Alan Tompkins. And that's me holding his book, which he just signed for me. And we became very good friends in the last sort of 7 or 8 years of his life, maybe 10 years of his life. And he did so much to try and help me. He was harassing Spielberg and Hanks, to try and put money into my film, because he was the art director on Saving Private Ryan. He was the art director on Band of Brothers. He was the art director on Bridge Too Far. His first job was on Cleopatra. So, this is the guy who designed the gun towers in the snow in that they built in Norway in Empire Strikes Back. He built, those gun towers and all that stuff around the trenches that the rebels had. That was all Alan's design, and he supervised that shoot. I mean, he wasn't the second unit director, but he supervised all the physics of filming that in Norway and if it would work. We sadly lost him to cancer. I think it might have been just before the pandemic. And but I also was fortunate to interview him at Pinewood Film Studios. I didn't even really have my YouTube channel running at that time. I just wanted to interview him. I just wanted to get it on tape, so to speak, because I knew he would have a lot to say. I knew he would be amazing, and no one had really interviewed him. So we went up to Pinewood. I think this was a different day this picture was taken. And I interviewed him. I met him many times and many phone calls. We became good friends. And then, as I said, he passed away. Very aggressive cancer, took him in a few months. And when I went to his life celebration, which I've got the brochure for behind me, they produced this incredible brochure for his life celebration. His wife had said to me the day before, she called me and said, "Would you mind saying a few words about Alan? Because you know how much he loved you and, held you in high regard and all this kind of thing." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll get up and say something, sure." Hadn't really thought much about it. And then when I got to the life celebration, this guy comes up to me, You're Lance Nielsen." I was like, "Yes." "Oh, right, so you're doing the main speech." I was like, "Am I?" "Yes, you're going last, you're doing the main speech." And,
No pressure.
sort of 10, 15 minutes tops. And I was like, right. And I hadn't even written anything. So I looked at my friend Nicola. I was there with producer Nicola Gregory, a great friend of mine who thankfully came with me because I just didn't want to go on my own. And looked at her, and we both kind of went, ha, ha, ha. And we sort of just went straight to the bar. She bought me like a really strong brandy. And I was like to the bar person, "Yeah, have you got her some notepaper and a pen, please?" And that was it. I was off and quickly kind of wrote the salient points and tried to make it fun, tried to make it about the good times and make people laugh. And it was quite a weird situation because I'd only known him in the last 10 years. I thought surely there must have been somebody else, but a lot of his friends had also passed away. So,
Yeah.
But I sat next to the director of Rambo 3 at that life celebration, Peter McDonald, who then became a friend of mine as well. Another fascinating guy. So, but his wife loved the speech. That's the most important thing. Oh yeah, there I am, literally in the trenches. Literally in the trenches. That's me.
And you want to talk about this at all?
Yeah, sorry, I was just downing some water.
No,
So
that's okay.
this is when we were working on Pegasus Bridge and that got stalled, I had discovered that there was a black paratrooper in the British Army, or African American, as you guys might say, although he'd be African English technically. But he was born in the UK, right? This guy called Sidney Cornell. His father was from America. His mother was local. And I was like, when I found this out, I was incredulous. I was like, I never knew we had any black British paratroopers in World War II. Because I just didn't think there were many around at that time, certainly not in the parachute regiment. It turned out to be completely untrue. And I think in the 7th Battalion alone, which was his unit, there was at least 6. And he dropped into France on D-Day and was one of the people. His unit was involved in keeping the Germans away from Pegasus Bridge, and he was his battalion's runner. So I thought, this is a great pilot for a kind of European band of brothers, and if I write it as a feature film, we can kind of have our cake and eat it. If no one wants to make the series, we can say, well, hey, the pilot is Sydney's story, so you can just tell that if you want, or we can do a series. And I got carried away, and I came up with all these other stories, and 6 of the paratrooper scripts were available on Amazon because I wanted people to be able to read them. And it's kind of a European band of brothers, and as people will know if they've seen Critical Drinkers' proof of concept thing, what we were doing here was we were basically doing the same thing. We were shooting, I was doing it slightly differently because I'd already cast my actor, so I was shooting proof of concept trailer with him in the lead because he was a selling point. He was quite well known in British television. And I at the same time, I shot a whole load of second unit, all of which I would know that we could use because I managed to get 3,000 people dropping from aeroplanes, on a perfect weather day, overcast, could work day or night with all these original Dakota aircraft. The sort of thing that costs Bridge Too Far, like, £500,000 of its budget,
I was
probably.
gonna say that's quite the money sucking proof of concept.
Well, I mean, I managed to shoot that day for like 750 quid because we went to the 75th anniversary in Normandy, and they were doing the biggest jump since World War II, and we filmed it. So, boom, there you go, problem solved.
Nice.
So, yeah,
Oops, went too
and
far. Try that again.
that's right. Yeah, and this is a sad story, man.
Yeah, it was incredible though.
I mean, so this is a really good friend of mine, who was one of the people we went to Holland and we did some stuff in Holland. Again, sort of test footage, second unit footage for Paratrooper. We were really pushing the boat out to get the visuals. We went to Arnhem. We went to Deventer, which was the city that doubled for Arnhem in Bridge Too Far. We wanted to see what we could shoot there and what we couldn't. And this guy, Gerrit Alberts, his name was Gerrit Abe Alberts, was an absolute dedicated historian to that period. And he was a journalist, and he also knew all the living history groups in Holland. So he was able to drum up loads of support for us. So when we turned up to do this little shot to, maybe get something for our trailer, we suddenly had 60 Dutch, perfectly dressed British paratroopers with weapons and everything. And I think it was at the end of 2023 that it was September of 23. I suddenly saw a post on his Facebook page, because I can't even remember if we met in person or not. We may have done, or it may be that he just drummed us up all this support, and we connected on social media. I can't remember if he was there when we filmed because there was so much going on. I just can't remember. And suddenly on his Facebook page, I've got aggressive cancer. It's come out of nowhere. I've got 3 months to live, tops. And I was like, oh my God, And at the time, I was just on the other side of my divorce. Work was non-existent. I had almost no savings. The last thing I needed to do was fly to Holland. But I had an aeroplane voucher with British Airways, which meant I could fly for free. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and see this guy, because he said he was going to fight it. Now, I remember him putting a post saying, I'm going to fight this. And what I did was, by then we had three of the paratrooper books had been published, with I think about 5 of the scripts in between them. So I printed out special editions with his name on the inside, saying keep fighting, and I took them over to him and I gave them to him personally in hospital, and that's that picture. And I didn't meet his son and his daughter, but within days they were in touch with me. And oh my God, you came all that way, because he wasn't near the airport either. That Holland is a small country, but he could not have lived further north in this really beautiful small town. And it took me 5 hours on the train to get there. Once I got the train from Amsterdam, I had to change twice. And, I was in a complete strange part of that country I'd never been to before. Beautiful place. And he passed away about 3 weeks after my visit. But the thing that his son told me was my trip had a profound effect on him. It changed him. It lifted his spirits completely. And he said that my visit was, he couldn't believe I'd come all that way. He just couldn't believe it, and it just sort of, I don't know, had a really positive psychological effect on him. So kind of the reason we were supposed to meet was that I was supposed to go on that trip and have that impact on him to make the last couple of weeks of his life easier. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah,
You know.
that was a beautiful. I was really touched when I read that. It's
Yeah, I nearly didn't include the story, and I got in touch with his son, and said, look, I want to include the story about your dad. He wished I'd used a different photo, but I said, look, if I don't show that photo with him holding the books, I said, I think the story doesn't have the same meaning, because that's the only photo of us together as well. So yeah, really great guy, and very much missed.
And of course, for anybody who hasn't seen the cover yet,
there's the book. Yeah, that's now Morrison's supermarket. That cinema, it's a supermarket now. Sadly,
what a shame.
I know, but the building looks the same. You can go onto Google Earth, you can find it. The structure of the building is all still there. That Art Deco structure and shape.
And the drinker did your forward.
Yeah, I mean, I told Drinker quite early on, because he'd read 1988, and he called me up after he read it and said, man, this book's like, actually, I found this really moving. I said, oh, thank you. And because this one was very film-centric, I asked him very early on, I said, look, quite like you to do the forward for this. And it was less about, because at the end of the day, a forward from a YouTuber on Amazon is neither here nor there, because the two marketplaces don't have a massive overlap, okay? It was more that I thought the book would really speak to him, and because he's as passionate about films as I am, and we both love the same kind of movies, we almost never disagree. I just knew he'd relate to the content. So yeah, he wrote me a blinding forward. I was very grateful.
Yeah. Pardon me, I'm getting a little croaky now.
No,
Does
that's
anyone
all right.
else? Does anyone else in the chat have any questions for Lance? Anything about writing or publishing or the book itself?
Or acting, because I'm also an acting coach, so I can. It might feel a bit off topic, but I can speak about that too. I
was
do.
thinking you need a whole separate video for that one.
Yeah, I mean, because I wear many hats, but they're all they're all under the same banner. They're all within the creative arts. They're all predominantly film and theatre and television related. Writing novels is pretty, like I said, is pretty new for me. But I've done enough of them now that I've edited some novels for people. I've ghostwritten some for people. I do like online courses or online writing coaching with people. So people will often, everybody's got a good book in them, you know. And I think that's true. I think everyone's got a good book, one good book in them. But a lot of people don't know how to start. And I've got a pretty good method for teaching people to do. They've got to do a whole load of work before they get on the computer, so that when they get on the computer, the work is not really there. It's you know, it's going to happen. It's all going to come out pretty quick.
Do you have a trick for not getting easily distracted?
Now, if I do, it's failing me miserably. I find this, if I fire up the computer and I know that I need to work, if I have to say, I'm not going to log in, because I write in increments of 3 to 4 hours, and I can do up to 3 increments a day. But the first one is always the best. The second one, you're normally checking the work on the first one. You only do the third one if you're on a deadline, right? So, I mean, you know, I have worked through the night before, but that's another story. But so if I'm on a deadline and I'm logging on and I'm getting ready to do that first increment of work, I have to not open any web browsers at all. No social media. Don't touch my email. Nothing. Just open the software that I want to work on, the script or the book or the play, and then forbid myself from touching or looking at anything else, not even looking at my phone, right? So no WhatsApp or anything like that for at least 4 hours until I'm ready to take that first break. Now, the numbers of times I can do that these days, that going, you know, I'll just check my Facebook. Oh my God, 17 messages. Who are these from? You know, I mean, as soon as I do that, that's 90 minutes gone. And if you're self-employed, which I am, or you're a freelance writer, or the first thing you're going to do in the block of time that you've allocated to yourself to write is you suddenly get distracted by social media. Let me look at that thing on YouTube or whatever. You know, you're fighting a losing battle from the word go, because as soon as you get distracted by one thing, that's it. And before you know it, 2 hours have gone and you're already losing steam. You're already losing momentum. The best part of your creative day is always the first few hours that you work. I can have quite good sessions towards the end of the night sometimes because there's less interruptions. You know, people are not likely to call me or whatever. But yeah, if I'm really, you know, if I really want to focus, I have to have that discipline. I can be very good at it, but I can also be very lax.
I do mostly I write mostly for magazines. And that I don't have any trouble with because they're all pretty short and they're on topics I don't need to do a huge amount of research on because I just know the stuff. But every time I try and write anything longer, I have to leave my office to write. I have to go. The only time I was ever really good at it, I was commuting to a job that was 2 states away, and I was either working or I was in a hotel. And I was in a hotel in an area where I did not want to leave the hotel, so I just wrote.
Right.
Being in unfamiliar surroundings has always been very helpful to me. But there are people who, need their specific surroundings too.
That's why, you know, you see a lot of people sitting in Starbucks with a laptop because for whatever reason there's distractions at home. It might be kids, it might be, you know, they need to be in a different space from their partner. They need to be, everybody's got their own way of disconnecting from the world. And I think, you know, whatever works. But as writers, we are very, very skilled at coming up with reasons not to write on that particular day. We're great at that, you know, we excel at it. Oh, I've just got to make that phone call. Oh, just one more video of Truly
Housework.
Criminal on YouTube, or whatever.
Housework.
And
I'm a wicked neat freak, and looking around going, I really should be cleaning house, not doing this.
yeah, I mean, you've got to be disciplined. If you're serious about whatever writing project you are tackling, book, play, film, whatever it may be, if you're allocating time to that project, you've got to be absolutely vicious with yourself about making sure that's what that time is for, and putting stipulations in place, i.e. turning off your phone, so that time is not intercepted by any unwanted third party or distractions. And as I say, in this day and age, it's easier than done. That's why it takes screenwriters in this day and age so long to complete even a 30-minute comedy episode. The writing rates
Well,
astound me.
they also require six people in a writing room, so everybody's going to be arguing about how the story
I
should
mean,
go.
that's yeah, and I mean, unless that room is led by a good captain, that approach is utterly delusional to telling a good story, because you've got 6 different people there, and unless this is a cohesive team of 6 people that have worked together before, who decide to work on the same project again, and they all get on great. And I don't know 6 people that all get on great, not to that degree.
Not if you have to work together all the time.
Right. And, and if you take that and you put that in the Hollywood environment, or with any big production company, you've now got 6 people that are all looking to make their mark.
Yeah.
The more experienced writers will want to throw their weight about, make sure they get to write the best episodes. The weaker ones, or the less experienced, are looking to, not be talked down to, but I mean, it's a melting pot of catastrophe. And then, as we've seen with a lot of new stuff, unfortunately, people are not focusing on the most important thing, which is always tell the story. That is the number one rule of writing absolutely anything. Always tell the story. Story first. Story is king. And then, the next thing is the characters. But if there's no story, there is no characters, right? So story first and characters. And
your characters have to sound different. They can't all have the same
Right,
shuffling
yeah.
motivations that change every 10 seconds.
No, and they need to be consistent. They need to be believable within the world that they exist in, and they need to function within that world. You need to buy into that world. That's why the world building in the first 30 minutes of the Star Wars movie is absolute genius. As a kid, I saw Star Wars very young in 1977, but within 10 minutes of that film, I knew who the Empire was, who the rebels were, what the Empire wanted, what the rebels were trying to hide, and I understood who Luke was, and I understood where Tatooine was in relation to the rest of everything else. So I had a pretty good grasp on, the basics of that universe. Within 10 minutes, within half an hour, I knew exactly who everyone was. These characters were easy to grasp. It's harder to be original these days because we have had so many films and TV shows in every genre possible. And, not everybody's as good as Tarantino as looking at something and saying, how can I do that again but differently, and improve it and reinvent it and turn it around into something else. And he's a genius at doing that. But I just think, when people look back at, let's say, 2024, don't know when Ghostbusters came out, I think it was 2016. From 2016 until about 2024, I would say the number of high quality movies, whilst not being, it's not that there haven't been any, but they've been few and far between. We've not had any new original IPs that have taken off in absolutely forever. I'm trying to think of the last one.
Well, they don't seem to
You know,
try new IPs these days anyway.
well,
They
that's
just
my
keep
point.
hammering the old ones into the ground.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, look, Rebel Moon, for all of its faults, there was a lot in it I quite liked. You know, some of the stuff looked really cool. I kind of like this idea of this weird head in the engine room that talked to people and shit. I didn't want to see 20-minute montages of people cutting wheat, but you know, at least it had some cool aliens. It had some interesting characters. The universe was very different. The look of the ships was
Well,
quite
except
different.
that
They weren't.
except that he was just trying to make he was trying to make a Star Wars show and he got turned down by Lucas. So
Yeah, yeah. But what we got was better than any of the recent Star Wars shows. I know that's not saying a lot, but yeah, I haven't watched the extended versions yet. And it's a shame that it wasn't rewritten more because it ended up being this bit of a hodgepodge mess. But there were some really good things about it. You know, ultimately, okay, it wasn't great, but you know, I still liked the original things in it, the stuff that we hadn't seen before, different weapons and
yeah,
whatever. It lacked cohesion. It lacked cohesion because it used to be, as you say, something else, and they kind of redressed it.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's great that you can look at things though and say, well, even though the total project wasn't great, here were things that weren't terrible.
I mean,
They
look,
tend
you know, I don't want anyone to unsubscribe from my channel now, but I even tried to do that with the Acolyte. I tried,
Oh God.
and I mean, but look,
The Acolyte was
if
the
you watch my
worst.
if you watch my Acolyte reviews, you'll see that by episode 3, my soul is pretty much destroyed. And I was trying to be positive. I was trying to, okay, what good can I say about this episode? And that list got like shorter and shorter and shorter until there wasn't anything, you know.
Yeah.
And then it was like, yeah,
That
by
was
episode 4 we were.
I know this is going to be a hot take, but I would watch the second season of Rings of Power again before I would watch The Acolyte again. Like
Oh,
I found
no,
it less painful overall.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, this is the other thing as well, is that they stage and produce these huge battles in shows. But when the geography of the battle makes no sense, there is no drama, and you're just sitting there watching, going, "This doesn't make sense. That wouldn't block the water there. These men wouldn't be able to cross a riverbed that was wet only 30 seconds earlier, just because the water's been magically removed. You know, you've got 10 feet of silt on any riverbed. You know, even riverbeds in you know, Middle Earth have got silt. They're
Do
still
you think
riverbeds.
it's do you think it's because younger generations, don't have, a lot of them don't have military experience and a lot of them don't have, you know, blue collar heavy lifting kinds. Like so many of the old actors had another career that was very blue collar before they became actors, and now it's like people just go straight into acting, and you end up with Rachel
Um,
Zegler. And you end up with Rachel Zegler.
well, let's not waste time talking about her. Um,
Just an
I
example.
don't think. I think there's an argument that could impact all kinds of different things in society in a positive and negative way. But no, I think it's more simpler than that. I think what we have a lot in production meetings now is someone of power, someone who's in an important position. When things are being argued round the table, someone at some point says, "Who cares? It's only a movie. Who cares? It's only a TV show. No one will care." Right? Listen, I've been at or eavesdropped in on more than one meeting or had recordings played to me of more than one meeting where we've heard that phrase. The difference between now and back then is the people who were making the movies did care. And you can see with the good quality stuff that we're getting, and we are getting some good stuff. I mean, look at the film The Substance, okay? not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you like a good horror film, that's a horror film made by people who cared about it. You know, Demi Moore obviously cared about that film a lot, and it's great that she's up for. I think she's up for an Oscar, and I think she may have just won a Golden Globe. I think today or yesterday. She was certainly nominated. I think she won. I think she won. And yeah, you know, so we are getting some stuff. I thought the Shogun television series was very well done, and you could tell again, whether you liked it or not, you could tell it was made by people who cared. It was made by people who cared to, you know, about Japan being represented accurately. You know, had a costume department who clearly cared about the costumes. The costumes in the film are amazing. You know, the film all looks consistent. The acting is very consistent. It's not a perfect show, but it is a very good show. And it's done very well, critically and commercially. So
You have another question from the chat. Do you think we're going to see another independent film revival now that social and economic conditions are similar to the 70s and 80s again?
the problem is that the people that could really revive independent films are still the big studios. The big studios could set up initiatives, very public initiatives, and they've done this before, but they've often all been bullshit. And where they look at there are thousands of good quality scripts out there, thousands, and you know, you can make a great movie for £10 million. It doesn't have to have Tom Hardy in it. There are a lot of great actors out there who would love to do a lead role. You know, you can make a very good movie in any genre, action or otherwise, for 10 million. You can make an exceptionally good movie for 20 or 25 million. And I really think if a studio invested in 2 years in movies that the budget were only X, you know, we're going to do 2 tiers. We're going to do 10 movies at £10 million. We're going to do 5 at 20, and that's it for 2 years. And we're going to see how they do. And I mean, you know, there's more to it than that. You've still got to pick 10 movies that you think are going to each find their audience. You can't be making non-commercial art house stuff just for the sake of it. But I do think there's a lot of directors out there, independent directors, who are making, you know, those kinds of films, but they're making them for under $200,000. And they're earnest, but they're also not great because the limitations of the budget are very obvious. And I just think, you know, it wouldn't take much for the powers that be in some of the major institutions of filmmaking to have a look around and see which directors have made the amazing fan films that exist online. You know, which directors have made these amazing independent films for $30,000, $50,000, $200,000. They had no help from the studio. They still went and made whatever they were making. It might not have been amazing, but they did it. These people are the people that have earned their spurs. These people are the people that deserve to have a proper budget. These people deserve a studio taking a risk on them. They're not being given the job for any other reason other than they've proved it already and they've gone and done it on their own with no one helping them. Those are the people I would like to see supported. And those are the sorts of people you want to put in charge of a movie with a budget of 10 mil.
Yeah,
They'll probably go away and make you 5 great movies for 10 million. And they'll say, I've done you 5. Here, 2 million each. You know, someone will do it.
somebody in the
So,
chat was saying that there was a movie. Oh, I've lost it. The Witch that was made for 4 million, and there was that Godzilla movie that everyone was really crazy about that was made like very inexpensively.
yeah, I think
So
Godzilla was about 15 or 20, maybe.
why we have to spend 300 million so that a movie has to make $1 billion when we know people are going to the theater? I guess the question is, would they make that? Well, I don't know. They seem to be willing to invest 300 million. So it seems strange that they wouldn't be willing to invest $10 million on whether or not
Well,
people are going to put butts in seats.
it's not sustainable. But to quote Judge Hirsch from Independence Day, you don't really think they spend $10,000 on a hammer, $30,000 on a toilet seat, do you?
Well,
You know,
yeah.
there's a lot of producers' names on these big $300 million, $400 million movies that have got armies of people working on the post-production CGI and whatever in some warehouse in China or wherever. And the budget's divided into two halves, and you've got above the line and below the line. And the above the line is your stars and your big fees. And producers that are out today, not all of them, but the majority, are basically looking to take as big a slice of that budget as they can. They don't really care what the project is or how it turns out. They just want that money for that next house or that next car or their mistress or her car,
Mm-hmm.
So, call me a cynic, but there was a time when we had amazing auteurs. There was a time when we had amazing, passionate filmmakers, and we do still have some. I mean, I hope Tarantino never quits, personally. He's one of the most amazingly talented people there is, and one of the few who can completely call his own shots. And whether you love or you hate Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I would argue even if you hate it, I'd still put you in a room with me for 10 minutes and I'll tell you why it's a work of genius, which it is. And, so we're incredibly lucky to still have people like him and Eggers and a couple of others. Michael Mann is another pretty consistent director. He's done some stuff I wasn't blown away by, but he's also given us some of the best movies ever made. So
Yeah, nobody's gonna win all of them, but
no,
well, we have hit the 90 minutes I
we have
promised I'd
indeed.
stop at, and then some. So
Yeah, and I'm becoming Captain Croaky, which is no good for people listening. But
well,
if
it's
there's
no good
any
for you
final
either.
questions,
Yes, final
yeah.
questions, or please. Um, I think we had some links for the Eraserhead. If you'd be willing to put those links back up for the book, if you've still got them, and
I
Lance,
found you
please.
I found you the link for 1988, which I put in the private chat.
Uh, okay,
In
we
this weird
two
thing
of
that
us,
I'm not used to using.
two of us tried to put it in the other the regular chat, and the link was so long it wouldn't fit.
That's annoying. Well, listen, if you want to check out 1988, just put in 1988 book under books on Amazon with Lance Nielsen next to it, and you'll find it. It's basically the book has got the cover of the Die Hard poster, but with my face where Bruce Willis's head would be, which I'm sure you can all agree is a far more attractive cover.
Your link works much better than the one on Amazon. So where will we
There you
find
go.
you for the rest of the week when you're not resting and eating lots of soup?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing that mostly this week. I've got an interview every day this week, I think. I'm interviewing 2 more people this week at least. Vicky Lee is on my channel tomorrow. She's a very famous fitness instructor, but also, like myself, has danced on stage at clubbing events, which is what I used to do back in the day, and have been doing it again. And that's a picture of me doing it on my profile. And she's really famous. She knows everybody. And yeah, I asked her to come on, and she said sure. So she's going to be an amazing guest. And then I think on Thursday, I've got an independent film director who's made a film called I See None, I think, which is to do with immigration in the UK. It's probably going to be quite controversial. So that's director Gulshan Singh who's coming on. And we're going to talk about his film. give it a bit of a plug. And I'll be back with the Nielsen ratings tomorrow night at 10 as well. That'll be the first one of the year for me with my usual panel, hopefully. That's where we talk about and review the latest films and stuff. The main topic actually tomorrow night is going to be, in case you haven't seen it, is going to be the Lockerbie drama, which has just come out with Colin Firth. It's called Lockerbie: Search for the Truth. I'll tell you the quick story about that before we go, which connects to the 1988 book, funnily enough. So, in 1988, I was at a summer camp called Camp Northwood, which isn't a million miles away from Syracuse in Utica, upstate New York. And a lot of the people that worked at that summer camp that summer were from Syracuse University. And several of my friends became friends with several of those students and would spend time with them that summer, 1988. And I talk about some of those characters in that book. What I didn't find out until years later was that a load of my friends knew a load of the Syracuse University students that took the Boeing Flight 103, I think it was called, Clipper of the Seas, Clipper of the Skies, or something like that. That's the Pan Am flight that had the bomb on board that killed everybody on board the plane and several people on the ground. And I was never entirely convinced by the narrative, the public narrative about who was responsible. It all seemed very convenient with the politics that was going on at the time, and I always looked between the lines. And of course, it turned out I was right, and that Libya were not primarily responsible for that bombing. It was actually a group in Syria in conjunction with Iran, who, Iran. Anyway, so that's a whole other political hot potato. But if you watch that series with Colin Firth, it's a 5-part drama. It's an incredible piece of television, absolutely superb. And we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. But it's weird to think that a load of friends of mine's friends were on that flight and none of them made it. And I think Syracuse University lost about 35 students on that flight, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, which must have been just like having the heart ripped out of that university, So my heart goes out to those people. Again, you watch something, it has an emotional impact on you.
Yeah.
I wanted to check all the facts that I'd been shown in that show were true. I never take a show at gospel. So I spent most of the day after I binged it, I spent 6 hours online, checking all those facts. Did they exaggerate anything? Was there anything they left out? And the answer to those questions is no, they didn't exaggerate anything, and no, they didn't leave out anything of significance. So you should definitely watch that. Very, very interesting.
Yeah. On a slightly more cheerful note, if you're feeling up to it, I believe, will be back here on Wednesday to talk about a game with us.
Yeah, if
you're feeling better.
If I'm feeling up to it, is it the same time?
It's 6 instead of 6:30. That's the only.
Okay. Yeah, as long as it's no later. Yeah, and one of the things I thought about actually was, because I've dabbled in games design as well. That's another thing I've dabbled in. Is there anything this man hasn't done?
Well, you're a creative soul.
Yeah, well, I'm a massive fan of Irwin Allen's disaster movies, as you would have read from the Towering Inferno entry. And I always wanted to make a board game on Towering Inferno, and I was in the process of designing it when 9/11 happened, and it was like, okay, board game about towers being on fire, probably not great market-wise right now. But I had the map designed and everything, and I left it alone, and I still haven't gone back to it. But I think I still have the map, this color printed map of the tower and stuff. And the idea was each player played a character from the disaster movie, like the mayor, the criminal, or the scammer, the scoundrel. You know, somebody else plays the fire chief, and you've all got a different objective to win the game. But the mechanic of the game is that the deck of characters gets shuffled every turn. So you might not play the fire chief every turn. You might play somebody else. So you use those characters' unique skills to move your pieces, to get them out of the building and start more fires to trap the other players' characters. That's basically the name of the game.
Well,
And
if you are not
yeah,
feeling up to it on Wednesday, I still have a creator spot open on the 22nd. Maybe we can rebook you and we can talk more about this then.
yeah, if yeah, I'll let you know. I'll probably just have to decide on the day and see how I'm feeling.
Okay.
But that game engine came from another game called Citadels, so I thought I could talk about Citadels and tie those two things in together. So
Okay.
yeah, there you go. All right.
Well,
Thank
either
you
way,
so
we'll
much for having me on.
Either way, we'll be delighted to have you again. So get some sleep,
Oh,
have some soup, have some fluids, feel better. And
yeah, thank you.
again, I appreciate you. I appreciate the chat for being here.
Yeah, a nice bunch of people watching. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for everyone in the chat. And yeah, do check out my YouTube channel, The Outcast Creative, and creative people are always welcome on there. And I collaborate with other YouTubers all the time. So, all right. Okay, that's me out of here then. Thank you very much.
Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
In a room lit by computer glows, a goat inspects striking a pose. Mic in hand, she starts the show. Questions fly, authors disclose. Indie authors in the seat of fame. Tales of adventure or love untamed. The writers who deserve more acclaim, sharing their stories, joys and pain. I clock the goat, ask what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Questions common and unique. Tale both modern and antique. Of writing and edits we will speak. Of the author's world, we'll take a peek. Books on high like paper towers. Stories blooming like summer flowers. Tales for readers to devour. Moments made in eclectic hours. Eclectic goat, ask what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Eclectic goat, ask what's your dream. Chat asks questions as they stream. A quirky quest through the unforeseen. Authors laughing, eyes agleam. Authors laugh, eyes agleam.